I absolutely loved interviewing and spending time with my grandparents. They live in Cicero, Indiana, and grew up in the neighboring town of Noblesville. They both graduated from Noblesville High School and were married shortly afterward before my grandpa became an executive for General Motors. Unfortunately, my grandpa has been very ill, but that made the interview and time spent with him all the more worthwhile. We started by discussing pop culture and important events of his youth. He initiated the discussion with popular music and television.
The Beatles had just come to this country. Elvis Presley was doing his thing. Some of the television shows that were popular back then was the I Love Lucy show and Alfred Hitchcock and Mr. Ed. Some really silly shows like that.
We also discussed shows like Candid Camera and Gunsmoke. In his free time, he loved to drive his Ford convertible to the drive-in, go to the weekly canteen held at the high school, or go to the Rainbow Roller Rink. We then talked about major national and international events that he had experienced throughout his lifetime.
I saw the first space shuttle, the first man on the moon. You know, that was significant.
Up now, and you can see the stars and stripes on the lunar surface.
Vietnam, along with many other things associated with that conflict.
I decided to go more into depth on the impact that the Vietnam War had made on American soil. During the second interview with my grandfather, we discussed how the anti-war protests of the time hadn't impacted him much because he had not shared their views and was isolated from any direct riots. He was also exempted from the draft at the time because he was married with children. We also discussed the excitement over the civil rights movement and social reforms of the era.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creeds. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people and to bring peace to our land.
Now, in this summer of 1964, the Civil Rights Bill is the law of the land. In the words of the President, it restricts no one's freedom so long as he respects the rights of others.
We live in an age of anarchy, both abroad and at home. We see mindless attacks on all the great institutions which have been created by free civilizations in the last 500 years. Even here in the United States, great universities are being systematically destroyed.
All of the changes in society during the span of the Vietnam War made it difficult for my grandpa to pick any one event that affected him the most. While he had to think hard about the circumstances of events that went on during that specific piece of history, he captured many ideas of the time. I was able to find out so much information from my grandparents, and it was such a great opportunity to discuss my grandparents' younger adult years and learn so much about what was really important to them.
As far as our own personal lives, there was a much of an effect because the only information you got about what was really going on for a lot of years was the 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock news. There would be short snippets of what had occurred that day. And it was really so far removed from what was occurring in our lives at home, that it didn't even really feel like a connection. The early years, they tried to portray that we really didn't have that much involvement in the war. But then I think as time went on, people started coming home from the war with different stories. I think more information and more truth of what really was going on came out. And I think that's when people's opinions started changing, when the real truth started filtering down.
The American people experienced an explosion of growth in education, welfare, civil rights, freedom of speech, women's rights, conservation, aeronautical space programs, and many movements such as hippie and drug cultures. Overall, it was impossible to even encompass the vast amount of change and mention even a slice of everything I learned about this era of reform. I am glad that I got the chance to learn about America during the Vietnam War and the conflict itself. Education helps us understand our past, and I have a great deal of respect for the veterans of all wars who help us keep our country safe.